Good afternoon. The Shir Leil Nishmas Elimelech ben Levi Yitzchak, Osher Shmuel Chaim ben Ephraim V'Tziona, Esther Basara, Osher ben Yosef, Tzvi Dov ben Chaim Pesach, William and Helen, Rachel Bas Yosef, David ben Avraham, Fred ben Richard, Yitzchak ben Sarah, Avraham ben Mordechai, David, Reuven ben Shmuel, Chana Golda, Bas Yisrael, Chaim ben Fega, Yaakov ben Yitzchak, Yeshua ben Shmuel, Mordechai Netzach ben Rivka, Leila Nishmas Zalman Lei ben Moshe, Leila Nishmas Amichai ben Yaakov, Leila Nishmatam. So today's shir is how the sons of Korach rose from hell, and how does it got to do with the Chorban Beis HaMikdash? Okay? So in last week's Parshas Pinchas, the Torah tells us, B'nei Korach lo mesu. How does the sons of Korach rising from hell, Evelyn, got to do with the Chorban? And how can you rise from hell? Right? So last week's Parshas Pinchas, Torah says, B'nei Korach lo mesu. The sons of Korach didn't die. So Rashi quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin 106, very strange. They were part of this conspiracy, Rashi says. In the middle of the machlokes, they did tshuva in their hearts. Lefikach nisbatze lehem mokom gevoa begehenum. There's a high place for them in hell. The yeshvu sham, and they're sitting there. Now, Chava, if they did tshuva, like Rashi says from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, why are they still in hell? In the balcony or the box seat?
I thought they just
Strange Rashi here. What?
I always thought they stepped away from.
Oh, so let's clear it up here. So Rashi quoting words on Sanhedrin 106, they were part of the conspiracy, they did tshuva, therefore nisbatzel hem mokom gavoa bagehenum b'yoshvu sham. So the $64 question is, if they did tshuva, why are they sitting in the hot spot? Literally in the hot spot, right? So let's try to understand this Gemara, and then we'll be able to see how it fits in with what? With the Chorban. Now we have to understand one thing, that the Talmud consists of two sections, Yechiel. The Ramban, when he debated Pablo Cristiani, the Talmud consists of two sections. Halacha and Agada. Only the halachic part of the Talmud must be taken literally. The Ramban, disputation at Barcelona in 1265 against Pablo Cristiani, laid down the rule that the Agadic part of the Talmud is not to be taken literally. And after him follows the Barsha and the Vilna Gaon and the Maharal, that the part of the Talmud which is not halacha, which is Agada like this, is not to be taken literally. So what does it mean? What does it mean? They did tshuva. The B'nai Korach did tshuva. Nisbatzel hem mokom gavoa kama begehenum. You have to know where to put the commas. You know, buddy, I had a grandfather that lived with us. And one day I knocked on his room and had a knife and fork in my hand. And I said, let's eat Grandpa. And he jumped out the window. It's a good thing we lived on the ground floor, right? So I tried again with my knife and fork, and I said, let's eat, Grandpa. He says, now you're talking, Sonny, what's for dinner? So you got to know where to put the commas, Reb Nochem, right? This batzla mokom gevoa. They have a high place. Why do they have a high place? Because they were in Gehenum. We see what that means. And they did tshuva. So now they're very high place. They're not in hell. Gotta know where to put the commas. Sonia, I don't want to eat my grandpa. Not a good idea. This batzala mokom gevoa. Now they're in a high place. Why? Because they were in Gehenna and they did tshuva, so therefore they are in a high place now. Now what does that mean? We know that heaven and hell are not physical places. Nechama. The Pasuk in Tehillim, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. God built this world as a stage for us to do chesed. So God built the physical world. Who creates heaven or hell? We do. Who said that? Our actions down here determine what's waiting for us on the other side. A person's behavior, lo yaleinu, can create hell on earth, or through tshuva we create Gan Eden. We create our own heaven or hell by our action down here. The Bnei Korach did a terrible sin. They rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu. Terrible sin. They created their own hell on earth. The sin became their hell, their guilty conscience. But once they did tshuva, charata, because of the tshuva, they're now mokum gavoa. They're not in hell. But because of their sin, who they were in the hell of their own making, their guilty conscience, once they did tshuva, they turned their sinful experience into a mokum gavoa. We create our own hell, and we create, through tshuva, we create our own mokum gavoa. Through tshuva, the Gemara in Yuma, page 86 says, Gedoyle tshuva mehava shezdonot nasala k'zchuyot. A person who does tshuva mehava, that aveira becomes what? A mitzvah. It's mind-boggling. Because they were in the hell of their own making. Hell is not some physical place. It's your own conscience. You do an aveira, you're haunted by the regret and the shame. Guilt is a good thing. People should feel guilty if they're perverts. They shouldn't be proud of it. Feel guilty. Because if you feel guilty, you'll do tshuva. If you don't feel guilty, you'll never do tshuva. So because they were in hell of their own making, now they're in mokum gavoa. The pasuk in Mishlei, Sheval Yipol Tzadik V'kam. The tzaddik will fall 7 times. So why is he called the tzaddik? V'kam. Because he gets up. So why is he called a tzaddik? Says the Baal Shem Tov, that's not pshat in pasuk. Only when a person falls 7 times and he doesn't give up, he doesn't give up. Shevel Yipol Tzadik V'kam. He fell 7. 7 means a lot in Tanakh. Ibn Ezra says 7 means a lot. The person falls and he doesn't give up, and he keeps getting up, then he's called a tzaddik. So I'm saying pshat in this Agadate Gemara, mokum gavoa, kama. Why are they now in a mokum gavoa? Because they did tshuva. Because they did tshuva mehava. So therefore, their past hell of their own making is now a mokum gavoa. Because they turned the sin into what? Into a mitzvah. Tshuva mehava, the aveira becomes what? A mitzvah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you say Olam Chesed Yibana,
Right.
when Hashem accepts your tshuva and it turns into a mitzvah, is that the chesed?
The chesed, the world was created that we should do chesed one for the other. Or it's also a chesed haboreh, that God gave us this opportunity, very good Malka, to turn the sin into a mitzvah. Mind-boggling. You know, turn manure into gold. The Bnei Korach took advantage of that. Bnei Korach loy mesu, they didn't die a spiritual death. They didn't give up hope. Because many people fall into the trap and what? Give up. On Ben Peles also did tshuva. The co-conspirator. What happened to him? Nothing. He disappears from the pages of history. He disappears. On Ben Peles disappears. You don't hear from him. He was a broken man. The word on from the word onan, which means mourning. He couldn't stop feeling sorry for himself. He couldn't stop mourning. Onan, Avel. The message of Bnei Korach Lo Mesu, they didn't give up. They wrote the most beautiful psalms. In fact, on the holiest day of the year, Rosh Hashanah, before we coronate the King of Kings, whose psalm do we read? La Matzeach B'nei Korach. You couldn't pick another psalm right before you would blow shofar to coronate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rebels, B'nei Korach, Rivka, very strange. On the holiest day of the year, Rosh Hashanah, we're coronating the king. The moment before, we Can't find no Psalm, Yechiel, except what? The Bnei Korach, rebel with a cause. What's the message? Unlike On ben Peles, they didn't wallow in the sins of the past. Of course you have to have charota and busha, but then you have to move on. Moving on. Oin couldn't move on. He felt so zerbrochen, so full of guilt and shame that he couldn't get out. That's Satan's trap. You're going to do tshuva? You did such a terrible sin? Your life is kaput. But the Bnei Korach didn't fall into that trap. They moved on. They're able to do tshuva. And not only did they do tshuva, but the most beautiful psalms in Tehillim are written by them when? After the sin. There's an amazing pasuk in Parshas Vayera. The Malach takes Lot out of the burning city, and he says to him, Himolet al nafshecha al tabit achrecha. Now, we don't need to know what the Malach said to Lot 3,700 years ago outside of Hiroshima. I mean, Sodom. The Torah is not a history book. The Torah is what? God's GPS. So what do I care what the Malach says to Lot as he take him out of the burning city, Sodom? Himolet al nafshecha al tabit achrecha. My Rebbe Rapam Zatzal said, if the Malach was only talking to Lot, it wouldn't be in the Torah. I don't need to know what the Malach said to Lot 37 years ago. He's speaking to everyone. Himolet al nafshecha. If you want to save your soul, al tabit achrecha. Don't keep wallowing in the sins of the past. Everybody has skeletons in the closet. Everyone makes a mistake, and many mistakes. Do tshuva. Himolet al nafshecha. If you want to save your godly soul, al tabit achrecha. Don't keep looking back. Don't make the mistake that On ben Peles, the word own, Onan, he couldn't stop mourning for himself, and he disappears from Jewish history. The Bnei Korach, they stopped looking back. They did tshuva. Because they were in Gehenna of their own making, now they're in Mokem Gavoa. They elevated themselves because of their sin. And they did tshuva, they became much greater, Mokem Gavoa. So don't wallow in the sins of the past. It's a time to what? Move on. Satan says, you're going to do tshuva? You're such a lowlife, you might as well stay in the pool room. Don't fall into that trap. On fell into that trap. But the Bnei Korach were able to extricate themselves and move on and move up. What has it got to do with the Korban? Let's take a look at our sheets. Mizmor LaAsaf. Who is Asaf? A grandson of Korach. He learned the lesson. Mizmor LaAsaf. You see Pasuk Aleph? It's highlighted in yellow, I think.
The first one highlighted.
Right? The first highlighted in yellow. Asaf happens to be a grandson of what? Of Korach. The Bnei Korach did tshuva. They wrote the most beautiful psalms, and not just them, but their grandchildren also. Mizmor LaAsaf, a song of Asaf. Elohim, God. Pasuk Aleph. Bo goyim v'nachlasecha. The goyim have come to your inheritance. Timut heichal kodshecha. They've defiled your holy sanctuary. Samus Yishlayim le'iyim. They made Jerusalem what? A pile of rubble. Look at Unkelus, please. He's sitting down for this Malka. You see Unkelus? Pasuk Aleph. Right? Iyim means, Rashi says, a pile of rubble. But what? Look at Rashi, Legalim. See Rashi? Rashi Aleph, Iyim, Legalim. Aleph, Rashi. See, it means a pile of rubble. But before we get that, look at Unkelus. See Unkelus Pasuk Aleph? I think it's highlighted in the left. Unkelus. Tushbacha ayedei da Asaf. A praise, a song of praise for Asaf. Al Churban Beis Magdasha. Say what? Asaf, take a pill and lie down. Why are you singing praises on the Churban Beis HaMikdash? Mizmor should be a kina. Asaf, you've been out in the heat too long. Tushbacha, see Unkelis? Tushbacha, a song of praise, al Yedoi da Asaf, al Churban Beis HaMikdash. So why is Asaf singing about the Churban? Shouldn't he be lamenting? Sonia, what's going on over here? What? What?
He must be the student of
He must be Rabbi Akiva. What? Very good what you're saying. She said the end of tractate Makot. Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis are taking a walk on the Temple Mount. And they see the fox, two-legged foxes playing soccer there and insulting the Jewish people, right? Who want to go pray there. So the rabbis are weeping and Rabbi Akiva is what? Laughing. So the rabbis are weeping, so Rabbi Akiva is laughing. So they ask him, why are you laughing? So a Jew answers the question, he says, why are you weeping? So what does he say? We're weeping because we see the holiest place in the world is inhabited by what? By two-legged terrorists, right? So he said, that's why I'm laughing. Because if the Churban Nevuah comes true, how much more will the Nevuah of what? Of Geula comes through. Amen. Right? Because we know that God's measure of kindness is 500 times greater than his punishment. If the Nevuah of destruction comes true, then how much more will be the Nechama? So therefore, he's laughing. Rabbi Akiva always saw it differently, right? But anyway, over here, Rashi wonders why Asaf is singing about the Churban when he should be what? Lamenting. So look at Rashi. Rashi Le'iyim. You see it? It's highlighted in yellow, I think. Legalim, a heap of piles. Umao Mizmor. Why is he singing? V'loi kina. He should be lamenting. Elofi Shenema, Rashi says, because it says in the book of Eicha, which we'll be reading Shabbos night, if Mashiach doesn't come, right? Kila Hashem et chamoso. God vented his fury. Ubama kila. How did God vent his fury? Vayatzeit eish b'tzion. A fire broke out in Zion. What does Zion mean? Excellent. The most excellent place in the world is the Beis HaMikdash. Zion means mitzuyan. Mitzuyan. A fire struck the excellent place, which is the Beis HaMikdash. Umizbo v'shir. So why is he taka singing? Sheshafach chamosai al eitzim al avanim. God poured out his fury. I think it's called venting in English. God vented his wrath and fury on eitzim al avanim v'lo yosek kloya b'banav, and he didn't destroy what? His people. So therefore Asaf is singing, yes, the Churban came, but because God destroyed his own house, that guaranteed that what? That the Jewish people will what? Will survive. That the Jewish people will survive.
Can I ask?
Well, let me just finish it. Now look at Pasuk Bet in the text. The dead bodies of your servants became food for the birds. There were so many unburied dead victims that the birds had a feast. Besar chasidecha lechaisai aretz. The flesh of your chasidim became food for the wild beasts. So look at Rashi. Look at Rashi Bet. Besar chasidecha. You see Rashi Bet? But lo rishayim, left side. Lo rishayim hoya. Why does the psalmist call them chasidim when they were wicked people? They were committing the three cardinal sins: avodah zarah, gili arad chazdamim. So why are they called chasidim? They're wicked people. Elam shekiblu pronaseyem. Once a wicked person has gotten his punishment, harayam chasidim. Now they're chasidim even without a shtreimel. Even though they were wicked people. That's why God brought the Churban, committing the three cardinal sins. But once a person, a rasha, receives his punishment, he's not called a rasha anymore. Now he's called what? Chasidim. So therefore they called what? Chasidim now. Isn't that amazing? But anyway, getting back to The first pasuk, pasuk Aleph. Iyim means a pile of rubble. Gali means pile. Gali means piles, right? A pile of rubble. So why is he singing and not Akina? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu vented his fury on Eitzim Vavanim, thereby guaranteeing that the Jewish people would survive. Now how could we feel the loss of the temple? I never saw the temple, Yechiel, did you? We haven't had a temple in 1947 years. How could I mourn for something, Sonia, that I never had? What's the point, lady? Have you the question? What's the point? How could I feel the loss of the temple? I never had it. So Rashi gives me the key. Imagine that your parent is homeless because of you. How would you feel? I made my parent homeless. How would I feel? We made our parent, with a capital P, homeless. God destroyed his house to guarantee my survival. So because of me, God has been homeless for 1947 years. If that shouldn't make me feel bad, I don't know what. Right? We made my beloved parent, with a capital P, homeless. We destroyed his house in order to guarantee what? Our survival. And therefore, that's a reason to mourn. Now, therefore, we do something very strange on Tisha B'Av. The Gemara in Tainus says, when did the temple burst into flame? Tisha B'Av afternoon. Tisha B'Av afternoon. We do something very strange. Tisha B'Av morning, we sit on the floor. We don't put on talis and tefillin as mourners. Tisha B'Av afternoon, we get up, we sit on a chair, we put on talis and tefillin. Isn't that bizarre? The very moment that the temple burst into flame, we should increase mourning, but no. Moshe Kapoya, how do you say? Cafe Hafuch. Cafe Hafuch, upside down world. The very time when the temple burst into flames, we lighten the mourning instead of increasing. Does that make any sense, Maddie? And Sfardim have a very strange custom. My wife is a Sfardi. Tisha B'Av afternoon, they make sponja. Hello? Tisha B'Av afternoon, they make sponja. Isn't that strange? No other time, buddy, to make sponja. Tisha B'Av afternoon? What's it all about? What? Ashkenazi women don't try this at home. But Sfardim have a minhag to make sponja on Tisha B'Av afternoon. Madua v'lama. Isn't that bizarre? No, it's not. What? 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 Sponja. How do you say it? Mop the floor. Mop the floor. Mop the floor. What's the answer? Dafka, when the temple bursts into flames, that's when you make sponja and you put on talis and tefillin? Yes. Because before the temple burst into flames, there was a chance that the Jewish people would not survive. Would not survive. Once the Yidden saw the temple burst into flames, Mickey, what did they do? Got up off the floor, make sponja, and put on towels and tefillin. If God was willing to burn his house, that means we're going to survive. Before Yechiel, before they saw the temple burst into flames, they had to sit on the floor and mourn because maybe we have no future. But when the Yidden saw the temple burst into flames on Tisha B'Av afternoon, Evelyn, they got up off the floor, the men put on talis and tefillin, and the women mopped the floor. If God is willing to burn his house, we have a future. We need a clean house because there's a Jewish future. If he chose to burn his house, that means that we will survive. If we survive, we have to have a clean house. We have to build a future.
Why did they think they survived if he was burning his house?
Because Mizmor al-Asaf, Madi, that's why I made you the... That's why Asaf is singing. La 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 la. Asaf is singing. Because look at Rashi. when God destroyed his own house, Rashi quotes Eicha, chapter 4, that's a reason to sing. If God is willing to destroy his own house, that's a guarantee that the Jewish people have what? A future. So get up off the floor, dafka, when the temple burst into flames, and not before. It looks like olam hafuch, but it's not. If God is willing to make himself homeless, that guarantees that we have a future. Get up off the floor, put on talis and tefillin, make your home clean. We're going to move on. But before Tisha B'Av afternoon, Nechama, we had no guarantee. Now,
what if someone dies then?
I don't want to get off the topic because a lot of ground. You ask me afterwards, okay? After we have a... Now, take a look at Pasuk Aleph very carefully. Mizmar al-Asaf, Elhim goy benachlosecha. Asaf in Pasuk Aleph, I underlined it in yellow, I think, calls Jerusalem and the temple Nachlosecha. What does Nachlosecha mean? Who's inherit? Who knows Hebrew here? Nachlosecha, your inheritance. Who's you? The big boss. But if you look at Eicha chapter 5, Yirmiyahu calls the temple Nachloseinu. Make up your mind. Nevi'im can't argue. Asaf, the great Navi, the grandson of Bnei Korach, he calls Yerushalayim and the temple Nachlosecha. It's the big boss's inheritance. But Jeremiah, in Eicha chapter 5, calls the temple what? Nachloseinu. Make up your mind. So to answer this question, we have to what? Ask another. The Rambam tells us that Kiddusha Shloima Batla. Shloima HaMelech, when he sanctified the Beis HaMikdash, when the Babylonians destroyed it, the Kiddusha became bottled, canceled. Avul Kiddushas Ezra, says the Rambam, loy batla. But the Kiddush, when Ezra came back and rebuilt the second temple, says Rambam, even though it's destroyed, that Kiddusha was never canceled. Rav Soloveitchik explains, what's the difference? Says Rav Soloveitchik, Yirmiyahu, who's speaking about Chorban Bayis Rishon, built by Shlomo, he calls the Beis HaMikdash what? Nachloseinu. It's our inheritance, because after the first temple was destroyed, it's no longer God's inheritance, because the Kiddush of Shlomo was bottled. But Asaf, says the Rav, is singing about Chorban Bayis Sheni. The Bayis Sheni was built by whom? Ezra. And the Rambam says, Kiddushas Ezra loy batla. The Kiddush of Ezra was never canceled even after the Churban. So since Asaf is singing about the Chorban Bayis Sheni, which that Kedusha was never canceled, therefore Asaf calls the Beis HaMikdash what? Nachlosecha. God, it's your problem. It's your inheritance. Because Bayis Sheni, the Kedusha, was never canceled. The question is why? Says Rav Soloveitchik something incredible. Kedusha Shlomo, how did that happen? King David conquered Jerusalem, right? He conquered Jerusalem through war. So the Babylonians made war against Shlomo HaMelech. Spy versus spy, war versus war, right? So King David conquered Jerusalem through war. The Babylonians came along and destroyed Jerusalem. So they canceled the war of what? Of King David's conquest, right? Kibush Milchama, Kibush. Jerusalem was conquered by war through King David from the Jebusites. Came along the Babylonians and made war. So their war was able to destroy the Kiddush of the Beis HaMikdash, because that was done through King David's conquering through war. But Kedushas Ezra Ezra never made any war. When he came back, there was no war. How was it? Settlements. Settled the land. There was no war. The Jewish people came back with Ezra, lot, and they settled the land. There was no war. So the Rav explains that Kedushas Eretz Yisrael through Ezra, which wasn't through war, which was only through what? Settlements. I hope Abomination is not listening, or John Balkari is not listening. But settlements, said Rav Soloveitchik 60 years ago, I have the tape in Yiddish, that makes sure that the Kedusha, Evelyn, is permanent. King David's Kedusha was canceled. War versus war. The Babylonians made war. They destroyed the temple. But the Kedusha of Ezra was through settlements. Like the Rab was a Novi, 60 years ago. Settling the land, and therefore the Rambam paskins that Kedushas Ezra loy batla me'olam. And therefore he explains that Asaph is speaking about Chorban Bayesheni. Chorban Bayesheni, the Kedusha was never canceled because it was done through settlements. So therefore Asaph calls the Beis HaMikdash Nachlosecha. What does Nachlosecha mean? God, it's your inheritance. So you have to redeem us because it's your problem. First temple's Nachlosenu. That Kedusha was canceled. So the Chorban, war versus war. But the second temple, there was no war. It was all through settlements, and that Kedusha can never be canceled. And therefore, Asaph, who's speaking about Bayesheni, calls the Beis HaMikdash what? Nachlosecha. And now we have another reason of why Asaph is singing. There's a pasuk in Yecheskel 36. God says, you don't have it on your sheet, Yecheskel 36, Loi lemanchem ani oseh. God says, I'm not going to bring Mashiach because of you. Ki im l'shem kotshi. Because of my holy name, asher chilaltem bagoyim. You desecrated my holy name. I'm going to bring Mashiach not for your sake. Hashem links his honor and his destiny to us. We're in the same boat. L'chein mizmor. Therefore, Asaph is singing about the Chorban, because God will not allow himself to go bankrupt. We're in the same boat. Hashem has to protect his investment.
Too big to fail.
We're too big to fail. Unlike Bank of America, like Lehman Brothers, we're too big to fail. And therefore, God tells Yecheskel chapter 36, V'kidashti Shemi hagadol b'chol habagoyim. I will sanctify my name that you have desecrated. How? Bagoyim. The very fact that Yidden live among Goyim is a Chil Hashem. How do they learn this in Babylon, Long Island? Yecheskel 36, V'kidashti Shemi hagadol. I will sanctify my great name. Hamchulal bagoyim. You Yidden, the very fact that you live among Goyim, that is considered what? A great Chil Hashem. So therefore, Asaph is singing, Sonia. Hashem has to bail us out. We're too big to fail. Unlike Lehman Brothers. We're too big to... Lehman Brothers failed. We're unlike Lehman Brothers. Therefore, Tisha B'Av is called a Moed. Isn't that bizarre, Mickey? In Eichot chapter 1, Tisha B'Av is called a Moed. Why is it called a Moed? Koralai Moed. Chapter 1 in Eichot. Why is it a Moed? Moed means a festival. Because it will be a festival. Because God cannot allow himself to be bankrupt. He's invested. Nachlosecha. God, it's your problem. So therefore, Tisha B'Av is called what? Evelyn, a Moed. What? And Zechariah tells us that Tzom Ravi, V'Tzom Chamishi, right? V'Tzom Ashvi, V'Tzom Asiri, Yiel Ososel Simcha. Zechariah chapter 8 says that Tisha B'Av and Shivos B'Tammuz will become what? Yom Tovim. Because God is in the same, Kaviyachol puts himself in the same boat. He said, it's my problem. I can't allow my great name to be desecrated forever. I'm going to have to intervene. So therefore, Asaf is what? Singing. It gets even better. By the rivers of Babylon, when we sat, and we remembered Zion, Tilim Kuf Lamed Zion, Psalm 137. Al Narois Bovel, by the rivers of Babylon, Sham Yoshavnu, there we sat, Gam Bochinu. Not there, Gam Bochinu, and we also cried. Sham Yoshavnu, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat, and Gam Bochinu, we also cried, B'zachrenu es Zion. When we remembered what? Mount Zion, Beis HaMikdash. What's the Gam? There are no extra words in Tanakh, John. There are no extra words. He said, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and we cried. What's the Gam? You sitting down, Chava? Says the Zohar, Gam Hashem Boche. The Gam is not superfluous. He also cried. We cried for the Churban and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Gam Hashem Boche, says the Zohar. So if God is crying, He's not going to cry forever. So that's Mizmor. Therefore, Asaf is what? Is singing that it's only a temporary state. As we read in the Haftorah, we just read it on Shabbos. Yesterday, wasn't that long ago. Yesterday, right? Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Yirmiyahu, Lintosh v'lintots lahavid laharos. Sometimes I have to tear down, destroy, and demolish. Livnot, in order to what? Rebuild better. Right? Lintosh ulahavit ulaharos, to demolish, tear down, and destroy. Kidei livnot, to build better. You ever see people buy a house or a building? It looks very nice. What do? They tear it down. They make a heap of rubble out of it. Why they do that, Nechama? They build something better.
That was a Torah portion for
yesterday's reading. You're right. Beautiful, Nechama. You have a great memory. In 2005, you're beautiful, Nechama. That was, I remember, like yesterday. That was the Haftorah. Not to discourage. You have to sometimes tear down. Kidei livnot yoter. So don't be discouraged. That's what God tells Jeremiah. It's only Jeremiah. It wouldn't be in the Tanakh. God is speaking to us. Not to be discouraged. Stay tuned. The best is yet to come.
Oh, good.
Right?
Yes.
Now,
Amen.
so that's one explanation of why God destroyed the temple, in order to vent His fury on Eitzim Ravanim, to demonstrate how much He loves us. He's willing to make Himself homeless to guarantee Jewish survival. So that should make us sad that we made our parent homeless. But there's another interpretation of why God destroyed His house. Are you sitting down? To answer this question, we're going to ask another one. Why did Moshe destroy the tablets? Same reason.
Yeah.
How'd you guess? The Meshech Chochmah says, why did Moshe destroy the tablets? God's own handiwork. Says the Meshech Chochmah, after the Egel, the Jews were so fachadet. How do you say that in English? Fachadet. A juk barosh, that the Jews would have deified and worshipped the Luchot. They were so fachadet, Sonia, I said it in English. Mixed up. That the Jews would have deified and worshipped the Luchot. So Moshe had no choice but to destroy it. Judaism is a God-centered religion, not a temple-centered religion, not a Luchot-centered religion. The temple became the reason for their sin, and I'll show it to you. It became an assurance policy. The Jews said that God is hostage to His temple. He's not going to put Himself out of business. Now remember, Chava, just 140 years before the Korban Beis Hamikdash, in the days of Cheskiyah HaMelech, the Jews were worshipping idols, right? 185,000 Assyrian troops dropped dead in one night. We say the Hibak Pesach night. In one night. So the Jews said, look at that. Look at this great miracles. 140 years before the Korban Beis Hamikdash, the entire Assyrian army of 185,000 dropped dead on Pesach night. So the Jews said, we're too big to fail. God will not put himself out of business. And therefore he says something incredible. You don't have it, but in Jeremiah chapter 7, he says something incredible. Jeremiah chapter 7, God tells Yirmiyahu to tell the people, Al tiftachu lechem el divrei hasheker. Leimor, heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem heima. You know what the people are saying? Do not rely on false words. The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. The people said, we can do whatever we want. We have an insurance policy. The Beis Hamikdash. God is not going to put himself out of business. Let's boogie. So Jeremiah chapter 7, pasuk 4. Al tiftachu lechem al divrei hasheker. God says to the mouth of Yirmiyahu, don't rely on lying words. Heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem. That's what the Yidden were saying. We have God's hostage, Yehuda. We have the heichal. Huh? God's too heavily invested to let himself go bankrupt. So God had to break free of the hostage theology. You like that? He had no choice but to what? Destroy his house. Because bizarre as it sounds, the Beis Hamikdash became what? Their reason to go on sinning. Jeremiah chapter 7, pasuk 4. And Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 9. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely because you have the temple? And chapter 7, verse 10, and you will come and stand before me in this house, upon which my name, you did the worst sin, God says to Yirmiyahu, right? You'll do adultery, swear falsely, steal, and you'll come and stand before me in this house, which my name is called, and say, we are saved. In order to commit all of these abominations, you hear, you'll come and stand in front of me. What does that mean, Chava? Which my name is called there. And we say, we got it made in the shade. Laman asot et kola toyavo ta'ele, in order to commit all of these abominations. So God had no choice, Nechama, but to what? Because bizarre as it sounds, Malka, the temple became the excuse to go on sinning. Jeremiah chapter 7.
Rabbi was reading Rabbi Kamenet.
Let me just finish. It goes on. Look at chapter 7. Your hair will stand up. Pasuk 14. V'asiti labayit asher nikra shmi alav asher atem botchim bo v'lamokim asher nasati lechem lavoseichem kasher siti l'shilo. And God says, I will do to this house, which my name is called, upon which you rely, insurance policy, and to the place that I gave you and your forefathers, I'll do exactly what I did to Mishkan Shiloh. I'll what? I'll destroy it. You leave me no choice. The temple became a magical good luck charm. John, it's unbelievable. The temple became a magical good luck charm. So God had no choice but to make himself homeless, to shock them. Nechama, I think it's called shock therapy. Nechama, I think it's called shock therapy. And it worked. Because 70 years later, we did tshuva and we came back. It worked. I think it's called shock therapy, right? You know what you were saying, Nechama, about what?
Well, Rabbi Chaim
Coming up the,
Right,
on the 3 weeks.
right,
Mentions another reason for the destruction of this.
yes.
The Jews were haughty because they had the baby.
Because they had the Beis Hamikdash,
And they were totally haughty because of this.
they figured that what? That
But they could do no wrong.
they can do no wrong, right? They were rationalizing.
And plus it's a tangible.
Now, if you go, right, if you go back to your sheets, Nechama, it's important to look inside. Go back to your sheets, please. Again, Pasuk Aleph. Do you have that? I have it highlighted. Mizmor al-Asaf. A song of Asaf. La 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 la. Strange. Elohim, God. Bo goy machos, Pasuk Aleph. Bo goy machosecha. The goyim have come to your inheritance. Not like Eicha says, Nachloseinu. Timu at the Heichal. They defiled the Heichal. Timu, how did they defile the Heichal? That's what it says. Timu, right, Sonia? Timu at the Heichal. They defiled your sanctuary. How? Look at Metzudas David on the bottom. Look at Metzudas David. Just have it highlighted in yellow, Yehuda. Metzudas David in yellow. Timu. See the bottom line, Timu?
Last line.
Last line, Timu. How did they defile the temple? Ki titus noapo imzona. Can you imagine, Chava? Titus brought a zona into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and had sex with her in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Gemara in Gittin, page 59. Mitzudas David, Timu ki titus noafba imzona. Now what's going on? Chanoch. How could God allow that? Bainish. How could God allow that? To take a zona to the Holy of Holies and have relations with her, and he didn't drop dead.
He should have.
He didn't drop dead.
Slowly.
He should have.
What's the message? What's the... That's later on. He got a mosquito that buzzed him in the head, but that's later on. But he didn't drop dead on the spot. How could God allow that?
Did she drop that on the spot?
No. What? Mickey, why did God allow that? I give up. What? No, no. Because the temple became an empty shell.
Were the crew
God doesn't dwell in the temple. V'osoli migdash v'shechanti b'tocham.
The Shekhinah left.
were the
Doesn't say b'tocho. V'osoli migdash v'shechanti b'tocham. Where does God dwell? B'toch kol echad ve'echad. Right? Inside of us. Right?
were the Kruvim there at the time?
No, the Bai Sheni, they had no ark. So the Kodesh HaKadoshim was empty. So when the Kohen went in there on Yom Kippur,
It was an empty shell.
he had to fantasize that he sees the Kruvim there. And that's why he would spritz the blood and also burn the incense. But the place was empty. But still, Kodesh HaKadoshim. So this is part of the shock therapy, Sonia. The Jews thought they had a good luck charm, a magic charm. So God had to shock them so much that if we are not following his words, even the temple itself has no value. It's an empty shell. You can even take a loyalenu, a zona in there. The Shekhinah had left, right? So to break free of the hostage theology, God had to allow this abomination. But that idea should make us weep on Tisha B'Av. That how corrupt we became that forced God to such drastic, what's it called? Drastic measures. Yes? Drastic measures. Ad kedei kach.
What order? Did this happen before the Beis HaMikdash was burned? What happened before?
Well, Titus,
Titus did the act
before, right? The day before. Titus did this act the day before the temple was destroyed, right? Titus.
No, but now the Goyim think they can do whatever they
What?
because
What?
no, because the reality is because the temple could be broken.
What? No, but that's the idea. The idea is nothing in Judaism has intrinsic kedusha except what? God and people. God and people, because we are, every Jew is chelik Elohim Yimal. Everything is in Kedusha, only intrinsic Kedusha is HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. But everything else is what? The Kedusha depends on our behavior. If we don't behave properly, the Luchos can be broken. The temple can be destroyed.
Where was the ark?
The ark is underneath the catacombs of the Beis Hamikdash. Catacombs?
That's when Titus did this?
Yeah, when Titus did this, the place was empty. But still, the ark was gone. The ark was hidden at the end of the first temple period. Good King Josiah. Good King Josiah.
Was a Jewish king?
Great tzaddik. Yoshio, under the orders of Yeshayahu, he hid the ark underneath the catacombs of the Beis Hamikdash before the Churban.
Right.
When Babylonians came in there, it was an empty place. All right?
Okay, that's good.
It was an empty place. But the idea, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's what it is. That's the Noahite. He was a Noahite.
Yeah.
And that's his joke.
It's not in Washington. It's underneath the temple, right?
Washington.
Wasn't in Washington? Where was it? No?
But it is Noahite. He was a Noahite. He restored.
Now, Elisheva opened up a Pandora's box. You know Pandora? Elisheva asked a good question. Because the Talmud in Yuma brings two opinions. Yiddish? One opinion is that the ark was hidden by Yoshiyahu HaMelech.
I like that.
And the other opinion is that it was captured by the Babylonians. Now we know that when two rabbis disagree, Chanoch, they're both right.
They're both right?
They're both right. Elu v'Deviel dilhim chayim. So the Rambam says there's no machlokes. They're both right. There were two arks.
That's right.
One ark that Bezalel made,
Right.
and one ark that Moshe Rabbeinu made.
That's right.
One had the broken tablets, and one had the second tablets. There were two arks. So the Rambam says both opinions are right. One ark was captured, and one ark was hidden under the catacombs of the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah, that's what
Which one is which? I don't know. But this is the Rambam, how he reconciles the two Tanoim in Masechta Yuma who disagree. Evelyn, one says the ark was captured by the Babylonians, the other said it was hidden. No machlokes, says Rambam, because there were two arks.
That's right.
There were two arks. One had the broken tablets, and one had the second tablets. So both opinions are what? Are correct. How do we know there were two arks? How do we know there were two arks?
Because we read it.
There's a pasuk in Parshas Bahaloscha, that we read just a few weeks ago. It says when they traveled by Midbar 10, when they traveled from the mountain of God, the ark of the covenant went in front of them.
That's right. Okay.
Rashi points out that earlier it says that the ark was in the middle of the camp. Rav Nachum. So Rashi wonders. By Midbar 10 it says that the ark traveled lifneihem. What does lifneihem mean? Before the camp. But by Midbar 10, Pasuk Lamed Gimel, by Yisum Har Hashem Derech Shloshas Yamim, and the ark traveled in front of them. But Rashi points out that early in the book of Bamidbar, it says that the ark traveled in the middle of the camp. So Rashi says, no problem. There are two arks. Two arks. One ark that Moshe made, that he kept the broken tablets, that traveled in front of the camp. The second ark that Bezalel made, with the second tablets, that was Betoch HaMachnot. That traveled what? In the middle of the camp. So there were two arks, and therefore both opinions in Tractate Yuma are right. One was captured, and the other was what? Was hidden, right?
Yeah.
So one carried the broken tablets, so that traveled in front of the camp when they traveled, and the second one that Bezalel made, that they kept the second tablets, that traveled in the midst of the camp. So there is no machlokis. So anyway, There is no machlokas. It just, I don't know which is which, doesn't matter. One was captured and one was killed. What? What? Moshe broke the tablets, so he put the broken tablets, what? In an ark. And actually it's also a pasuk in Parshas Truma, it says that Betzalel made the ark. In Parshas Truma, it says that Betzalel made the ark, right? In Parshas Akev, Moshe says in Devarim 10, at that time Hashem said, carve out tablets of stone like the first, and make for yourself our own eights, and make for yourself a wooden ark. So Moshe's ark was made out of total wood. Betzalel's ark was made out of wood overlaid with gold. So the Torah clearly alludes to what? Two separate arks. Two separate arks, right? Moshe's ark, Devarim 10. You look at Devarim 9. Devarim 10, Pasuk 1, right? Yeah. Moshe's ark. And Moshe says clearly, Devarim 10, Pasuk 3, and I made the ark out of Atzei Shittim. And Betzalel made his covered with gold. So obviously they're what? They're two different arks. One had the broken tablets, one had the whole tablets. So both opinions are right. One was captured and one was hidden. So which is which, buddy? Stay tuned. All right? Whatever it is. Any questions, comments? What was your question, Shirley?
If someone dies on the afternoon,
so if someone dies on Tisha B'Av, so what's the question?
so is there does any one of the questions say anything about
If someone dies on Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av is a rabbinic, so therefore it's like a regular day as far as mourning. Like a regular day as far as mourning, right? The day of death of a close relative, before the burial, a person cannot do any mitzvot.
That's right.
Until after the burial, right?
That's right.
So anyway, hopefully if Mashiach comes before what? Tisha B'Av, then we will have a real moed. It'll be a moed, right?
That's right.
Stay tuned, right? Any other questions, comments?
Yes, on Thursday.
Thursday at 2 o'clock, we have current events in the Haftorah. Thank you very much.